Hello, bonjour, all the way from Newfoundland and Labrador. I bring you Saku's Great Newfoundland Adventure, the story of a Cape Shore water dog who traveled with his owner Justin, a well-known explorer, through the province's interior. The eye-popping illustrations from my book feature a combination of pictures from the trip itself and by award-winning artist Corey Majo is illustrations. Let's begin. My name is Saku, and I can tell you that our house was bustling for many months. My friend Justin had laid out so much camping gear, cameras, and warm clothes that the more I sniffed around the preparation room, the more I found it exciting. Oh yes, there were lots of yummy snacks for both of us. Finally, there came a sunny, super April morning when I knew something special was happening. Justin, his friend Heather, and I drove west on the Trans-Canada Highway for a very long time. The wheels of the car clicked and hummed so much that I felt like barking along. Instead, I put my cold, damp nose between my black, velvety paws and fell into a carefree snooze. We were going on an adventure, but I wasn't worried because Justin was so very well prepared. I was totally ready as well. Justin had trained me to bound around in the country and sleep in a tent from the time I was very little. I'd always felt very special because I knew that Justin's favorite hockey player and team were the Montreal Canadiens, and their longtime star, Saku Koivu, was his favorite player. That's how I got my name. When Justin calls out Saku, like a hockey player, I run proudly towards him, carrying a stick that I have found. Later that day, I awoke to find the sun going down and the car slowed. Time for a stretch, Saku, announced Justin. The air was crisp. It had started to snow, so sleeping in our nylon tent was not happening. Instead, we found a B&B. After 3 days of waiting for better weather, we were anxious to get moving on our long journey back to St. John's. Months ago, Justin had told me, "Soon, Saku, you and I will travel to the other side of Newfoundland and begin a big adventure. Now that we are here, I want to run into the nearest patch of trees, but I hear Justin call, 'Heel.' That is my signal to run back to his side." For several days we walked and walked, climbing higher and higher, trying not to think of the many, many miles that separated us from our family and friends. I soon learned that the sound of Justin's axe striking tree branches meant the end of our daily journey and that camp time had arrived. Each evening it was necessary to pack down the snow before the tent could be raised. Next step was to start a fire. "Hey, my warm bed is coming," I would say to myself, as Justin busied himself making a thick bough bed to raise me off the forest floor and get me closer to the glowing flames. After all, we were a team, and later I was happy to push my cold nose against Justin's hand once we settled inside the tent for the night. Once we were on higher ground, Justin had no problem connecting with Heather on his satellite phone to tell her of our progress. I could hear Bear, my doggy friend, woofing through the phone from many kilometers away. That sound stirred memories of swimming with Bear behind Justin's boat, a favorite sport of ours last summer. I slept soundly all night because, like Justin, I was exhausted from the 20 kilometers we had covered. The next morning, I woke up just as Justin went through the tent opening, rubbing his eyes sleepily. I jumped to my paws and followed him through the tent opening too, but too late. Where was Justin? He had disappeared before my eyes. With powdery snow scattering in all directions, Justin lifted himself up and scrambled onto the hard-packed snow near the tent. He had fallen into a snow well. I went over and licked his face with relief. After that nasty surprise, it was time to start off for the morning, with Justin pulling our 100-pound sled and me carrying my GoPro camera. A week later, muddy patches started to appear among the trees. It was getting harder and harder for Justin to pull his heavy sled. There was now another problem. Every step that I took gave me a sharp, painful jolt in my left hind leg. Try as I might, I could not hide my limp from Justin. Luckily, he had visited the veterinarian before the trip began and was carrying special medicine for me. We were now at our first food stop near the Burgeo access road. That night, Justin examined my paw. The hard, crusty snow had broken one of my pads. It was super soothing when Justin applied a healing cream to my sore paw. He told me, "We will stay here at Peter Stride's pond for a few days to let you recover and allow the sleeping lakes to melt their winter ice." I was so happy with this decision that I licked Justin's hand and wagged my tail in approval. I was more relaxed and happy as I lay watching the fire that night. With fresh supplies from the Burgeo stop, and now that I was feeling more comfortable, our travels continued. By now, my nose told me that my food dish and yummy-smelling dog food were inside the pack that I was carrying. The walk was much longer than these I used to take on the street with Justin's mom. There was no path to follow at all. Looking around, we could see bog and scruffy grass coming into view. There were so many things to tell Bear about, like that real black bear that I had spotted last week, plus the howling sounds of coyotes I heard last night. I sensed how important our travels were, and each morning I could not stop bouncing around inside our tent. Every wag of my tail and sniff around my food dish were aimed at showing Justin how impatient I was to start the day. Justin told me, "We have 15 kilometres to cover tomorrow, Saku. You will see new brooks, ponds, and woodlands." However, in the middle of the province, our travels came to a standstill on the frozen shore of Malpeg Lake. Every morning, for 6 long days, Justin would check our rations while I bounded from the tent, ready to run after moose or smaller animals. Each morning, looking at Justin's disappointed gaze upon the ice-filled lake, I knew I would have to content myself with chasing squirrels or sleeping inside the tent. Finally, the blue waters of the lakes started to break out, and we could head east and for home. We'll continue tomorrow.